Best NFL players who never won a Super Bowl. What's worse than never making it to the NFL? Making it to the top of your position and never holding that Lombardi trophy. When viewers see this, they're asking, who are the greatest players without rings? How did they dominate for years without winning? What stopped them from getting the championship they earned? Here's the brutal reality. These 10 players were Hall of Famers, all pros and legends at their positions, but none of them ever won a Super Bowl. These are the greatest careers that ended without the one thing that matters most in football. Number 10, Tony Gonzalez, the greatest tight end to never win a Super Bowl. 14 Pro Bowl selections, 6 first-team All-Pro honors, 1,325 career receptions for 15,127 yards and 111 touchdowns. When Gonzalez retired, he held every major tight end receiving record. He redefined the position. Gonzalez played 17 seasons, 12 with Kansas City, 5 with Atlanta. He made the playoffs 6 times. His closest chance came in 2012 with the Falcons. They made the NFC Championship game, lost to San Francisco, and Gonzalez never got another shot. He retired in 2013 at age 37, knowing he'd done everything possible except win a championship. The tragedy of Gonzalez is that he was loyal to bad teams. Kansas City was terrible for most of his career. By the time he got to Atlanta, he was already past his prime. Gonzalez proved that individual excellence means nothing if your team can't win when it matters. But spending your career on bad teams is one thing. What if you were on good teams that just couldn't finish? That's the heartbreaking story of our next player. Number 9, Larry Fitzgerald, one of the greatest receivers in NFL history who came within minutes of a championship. 11 Pro Bowl selections, 3 first-team All-Pro honors, 1,432 receptions for 17,492 yards and 121 touchdowns. Fitzgerald made 1 Super Bowl with Arizona in 2008. He had one of the greatest playoff performances ever. He caught 30 passes for 546 yards and 7 touchdowns in 4 playoff games. Absolutely dominant. In the Super Bowl against Pittsburgh, Fitzgerald caught a go-ahead touchdown with under 3 minutes left. Arizona was about to win its first championship ever. Then, Ben Roethlisberger drove down the field and threw the game-winning touchdown to Santonio Holmes. The Cardinals lost 27-23. Fitzgerald never got back to the Super Bowl. He played until 2020, bounced around trying to find a contender, but the ring never came. The really painful part? Fitzgerald did everything right in that Super Bowl. He was unstoppable. His team just couldn't hold the lead for 3 more minutes. Sometimes you can play perfectly and still lose. That's the cruelty of football. Speaking of playing perfectly and losing, our next player is so dominant that he's considered the best ever at his position. But he retired without a ring, and it haunts his legacy forever. Number 8, Bruce Smith, the all-time leader in sacks who never won a Super Bowl. 11 Pro Bowl selections, 8 first-team All-Pro honors, 200 career sacks are the most in NFL history. Smith played in 4 consecutive Super Bowls with Buffalo from 1990 to 1993. He lost all 4. 4 chances at a championship, 4 failures. That's not just disappointing, that's devastating. The worst part? Smith was dominant in those Super Bowl runs. He was the best defensive player in football during that stretch. But the Bills ran into dynasties. The Giants, Redskins, and Cowboys twice. Buffalo never had a chance. Smith finished his career with Washington, hoping to finally get a ring. It never happened. He retired as the most feared pass rusher in NFL history, but without the championship that would complete his legacy. Smith proved that you can be the best at your position and still never win if your team isn't good enough around you. But at least Smith made 4 Super Bowls. Our next player made 1, played the game of his life, and watched his team blow it in the worst way possible. Number 7, LaDainian Tomlinson, LT, one of the most complete running backs in NFL history. 5 Pro Bowl selections, 3 first-team All-Pro honors, 13,684 rushing yards, 162 total touchdowns, 2006 MVP. Tomlinson's 2006 season is one of the greatest ever by a running back. 28 rushing touchdowns, 31 total touchdowns, absolutely unstoppable. But the Chargers never made the Super Bowl with Tomlinson. They came close multiple times, but couldn't finish. The 2007 playoffs were especially painful. San Diego had the best team in football. They were 14-2 in the regular season. Then, they lost to New England in the AFC Championship game. Tomlinson was injured and couldn't play at full strength. The championship window closed. Tomlinson finished his career with the Jets, chasing a ring as a backup. It never came. He said later that he'd rather be in the Hall of Fame without a ring than have a ring without being Hall of Fame worthy. That's how he coped with the disappointment. But everyone knows Tomlinson wishes he had both. Speaking of wishing for both, our next player was so close to winning a championship that he could taste it. Then his team fell apart in the biggest game of his life. Number 6, Jim Kelly, the quarterback of those 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses with Buffalo. 5 Pro Bowl selections, first team All-Pro in 1991, 35,467 passing yards, 237 touchdowns. Kelly led the Bills to 4 straight Super Bowls from 1990 to 1993. They lost all 4. The first one was the most painful. Super Bowl 25 against the Giants. Scott Norwood's field goal sailed wide right with seconds left. The Bills lost 20-19. That's close. 1 kick away from winning it all. The next 3 Super Bowls were blowouts. Washington destroyed them 37-24. Dallas crushed them 52-17 and 30-13. Kelly watched his championship window slam shut 4 times in 4 years. That's psychological torture. The really brutal part, Kelly was great in those playoff runs. He did everything a quarterback is supposed to do. But football is a team sport, and the Bills' defense couldn't stop anyone in those Super Bowls. Kelly retired knowing he led one of the greatest offenses ever, but couldn't win the big one when it mattered most. But at least Kelly had chances. Our next player dominated his position for over a decade and barely even made the playoffs. Number 5, Barry Sanders, the most electrifying running back in NFL history who never won a Super Bowl. 10 Pro Bowl selections, 6 first-team All-Pro honors, 15,269 rushing yards in just 10 seasons. Sanders retired at age 31 while still in his prime. He walked away from the game because Detroit was so bad he couldn't take it anymore. The Lions made the playoffs 5 times with Sanders. They won 1 playoff game total. 1 playoff win in 10 seasons. That's how bad Detroit was. Sanders carried that franchise on his back for a decade and got nothing in return. No help, no support, no chance at a championship. He could have kept playing and probably broken Walter Payton's all-time rushing record. Instead, he retired because football stopped being fun. The tragedy of Barry Sanders is that we'll never know how good he could have been on a competent team. He made the Lions relevant by himself. Imagine Sanders on the Cowboys or 49ers in the 1990s. He probably wins multiple championships. Instead, he's remembered as the greatest player to waste his career in Detroit. Speaking of wasted careers, our next player had all the weapons, all the talent, and still couldn't win a championship. His story might be the most frustrating on this entire list. Number 4, Randy Moss, the most talented wide receiver to ever play football who never won a Super Bowl. 6 Pro Bowl selections, 4 first-team All-Pro honors, 15,292 receiving yards, 156 touchdown receptions. Moss made 2 Super Bowls, 2007 with New England and 2012 with San Francisco. He lost both. The 2007 season is the most painful. The Patriots went 18-0 in the regular season. Moss caught 23 touchdowns. They were unstoppable. Then the Giants beat them in the Super Bowl. Perfection died, and so did Moss's best chance at a ring. 5 years later, Moss joined San Francisco mid-season, hoping to finally get a championship. They made the Super Bowl, lost to Baltimore, and Moss retired without a ring. The frustration with Moss is that he had chances with loaded teams. The 2007 Patriots, the 2012 49ers both should have won, but both came up short, and Moss paid the price. He finished his career as one of the most talented players ever, but without the ring to complete his legacy. Talent without championships is just wasted potential. Moss proved that better than anyone. but wasted potential is nothing compared to our top 3. These players are so legendary that their ringless careers define what it means to be great without winning. Number 3, Dan Marino, the greatest quarterback to never win a Super Bowl. 9 Pro Bowl selections, 3 first-team All-Pro honors, 61,361 passing yards, 420 touchdowns when he retired. Marino's 1984 season is still one of the best quarterback performances ever. 5,084 passing yards, 48 touchdowns. Those numbers were science fiction in 1984. Miami made the Super Bowl that year. They lost to San Francisco 38-16. That was Marino's only Super Bowl appearance in 17 seasons. 17 years, 1 Super Bowl, no championships. The problem was never Marino. It was the teams around him. Miami's defense wasn't good enough. The offensive line wasn't consistent enough. The supporting cast wasn't championship level. Marino carried those teams to the playoffs year after year anyway. He won 155 career games as a starter, the most for any quarterback without a Super Bowl ring. But 155 means nothing without that one championship game victory. Marino retired in 1999, knowing he was one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, but without the ring to prove it. His legacy is forever defined by what he didn't do instead of what he did. That's the cruelty of football. Individual greatness gets erased by team failure. Speaking of individual greatness getting erased, our final 2 players are so dominant that their ringless careers represent everything painful about being great in the NFL. Number 2, Dick Butkus, the most feared linebacker in NFL history who never won a Super Bowl. 8 Pro Bowl selections, 5 first-team All-Pro honors, the most intimidating defensive player to ever play the game. Butkus played his entire 9-year career with the Chicago Bears from 1965 to 1973. The Bears were terrible for most of that time. Chicago never made the playoffs with Butkus, not once. Not a single playoff appearance in 9 seasons. Think about that. The most dominant defensive player of his era never even got a chance to play for a championship. Butkus retired at age 31 because knee injuries destroyed his body. He gave everything to football and got nothing in return. No playoffs, no Super Bowls, no championships. Just 9 years of brutal hits and devastating losses. The tragedy of Butkus is that he played in an era where individual defensive players couldn't carry teams. Quarterbacks win championships, not linebackers. Butkus was in the wrong position at the wrong time on the wrong team. That combination meant his greatness got washed. He's remembered as one of the most feared players ever, but his career feels incomplete without a championship. But at least Butkus never had a real chance. Our number 1 player had multiple chances, came so close he could taste it, and watched it slip away in the most painful ways imaginable. Number 1, Gale Sayers, the Kansas Comet, the most tragic ringless career in NFL history. 4 Pro Bowl selections in just 7 seasons, 5-time All-Pro, Hall of Fame inductee at age 34, the youngest player ever inducted at the time. Sayers played only 7 seasons for the Bears. He had 991 carries for 4,956 yards, 112 catches for 1,307 yards, and scored 56 touchdowns. His rookie season in 1965 was legendary. 22 touchdowns, including 6 in one game against San Francisco. Nobody had ever seen anything like him. Sayers could cut, juke, and accelerate in ways that looked superhuman. He made defenders miss in the open field like they were standing still. Then came 1968, knee injury, the first of multiple injuries that would destroy his career. Sayers came back in 1969 and led the league in rushing, proving he could overcome anything, but the damage was done. More knee injuries followed. His explosiveness disappeared. The player who could score from anywhere became a shell of himself. Despite the production from Sayers, the Bears as a whole struggled to find success. In games that Sayers played, the team compiled a record of 29 wins, 36 losses, and 3 ties, and failed to reach the postseason. Think about that. Gale Sayers never played a single playoff game in his entire career. Not one. The greatest running back talent of his generation never got to play in January. Sayers retired at age 28. 28 years old. Most running backs are just entering their prime at that age. He played 68 games total. That's not even 5 full seasons worth of games. What makes Sayers number 1 on this list isn't just that he never won a Super Bowl, it's that he never had a chance. The Bears were terrible during his career. His body betrayed him before he could reach his peak. The window opened and closed in 7 years. We got glimpses of greatness so profound that he made the Hall of Fame with basically 4 elite seasons. That's how good he was. But we never got to see prime Gale Sayers in the playoffs. We never got to see what he could do on the biggest stage. That's not just a ringless career, that's a tragedy. Barry Sanders retired early by choice. Sayers retired early because his body quit on him while playing for a franchise that wasted his prime. Dan Marino played 17 seasons and made 1 Super Bowl. Sayers played 7 seasons and never made the playoffs. The really heartbreaking part? Sayers was so good that even with his shortened career, he's still considered one of the greatest running backs ever. Imagine if he'd stayed healthy for 12 to 15 years. Imagine if the Bears had built a team around him. Imagine if he'd gotten just 1 playoff run to show the world what he could do in January. We'll never know. And that's what makes Gale Sayers the most painful ringless career in NFL history. He wasn't just great without a ring. He was spectacular without ever getting the chance to play for one. The curse of no rings. Why do we judge NFL players so harshly for not winning Super Bowls? Because football is the ultimate team sport where championships define greatness. Basketball has 5 starters and 1 superstar can carry a team. Baseball is all individuals doing their own jobs. Hockey is similar. But football requires 22 starters, special teams, coaching, and perfect execution on every single play. One player can't win a Super Bowl alone, but we still judge them like they can. Dan Marino didn't have a defense. That's not his fault, but his legacy suffers anyway. Barry Sanders played for the worst franchise in football. Not his fault. Legacy incomplete. Bruce Smith made 4 Super Bowls and lost all 4. Not his fault. The Bills ran into dynasties. Legacy question. The judgment creates impossible pressure on players. Win a championship or your career doesn't matter. Larry Fitzgerald played the game of his life in the 2008 playoffs. His team lost by 4 points. Now he's remembered as a great player who couldn't win the big one. That's not fair, but football doesn't care about fair. The human cost of never winning is real. These players carry that weight forever. Jim Kelly went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost all 4. That's not failure. That's making it farther than 28 other teams 4 years in a row. But Kelly is remembered for the losses, not the achievement of getting there. Randy Moss had 2 shots at championships with loaded teams. Both times, his team came up short. Now, he's the most talented receiver who couldn't win when it mattered. The worst part is how the rings define legacies in ways that aren't logical. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Dan Marino didn't. Does that make Dilfer better than Marino? Of course not. But Dilfer has something Marino doesn't. Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowl rings. Dan Marino has 0. Eli is not better than Marino, but his legacy is more complete. That's the cruelty of using championships to judge individual greatness. The what ifs. The saddest part about these ringless careers is the what ifs. What if Scott Norwood had made that field goal in Super Bowl 25? Jim Kelly wins a championship, and the Bills' dynasty narrative completely changes. What if the 2007 Patriots had beaten the Giants? Randy Moss retires with a ring on the greatest team ever. His legacy is completely different. What if Dan Marino had a defense in Miami? He probably wins multiple Super Bowls and gets mentioned with Montana and Brady. What if Barry Sanders had played for Dallas or San Francisco instead of Detroit? He probably has 3 rings and breaks every rushing record. What if the 2012 Falcons had held on against the 49ers? Tony Gonzalez retires a champion and his legacy is complete. These what-ifs haunt players for the rest of their lives. LaDainian Tomlinson said he'd choose the Hall of Fame over a Super Bowl ring if forced to pick one, but everyone knows he wishes he had both. Larry Fitzgerald played until age 37, bouncing from team to team, hoping to find one more shot at a championship. That desperation shows how much the missing ring hurts. The economic impact of winning changes everything. Championship players get bigger endorsements, better coaching jobs, and more respect in the media. Dan Marino became a great analyst, partly because of his personality, but also partly because he's the lovable ringless legend who everyone roots for. If Marino had won championships, would he have gotten the same opportunities? Maybe yes, maybe no. His ringless career became his brand. Jim Kelly has spent decades answering questions about losing 4 Super Bowls. That's his entire post-career identity, the guy who came so close and failed. Rings don't just affect legacies, they affect how players are remembered, how they're paid, and what opportunities they get after retirement. Why we love them anyway. Here's the thing about these ringless legends. We love them because they tried and failed. Dan Marino is more relatable than Tom Brady. Marino worked his whole career and came up short. That's most people's lives. Barry Sanders walked away from football because it stopped being fun. That's more honest than chasing money and rings. Bruce Smith lost 4 Super Bowls and kept playing anyway. That resilience matters more than championships. These players prove that greatness isn't only defined by rings, it's defined by impact, consistency, and how you handle failure. Dan Marino changed how quarterbacks play. The modern NFL is built on his style. That legacy transcends championships. Randy Moss was the most talented receiver ever. That matters even without a ring. Larry Fitzgerald played 17 seasons with class and dignity. That's rare in professional sports. We remember these players not because they won, but because they showed us that greatness doesn't always get rewarded. Championships require talent, timing, teammates, health, coaching, and luck. These players had most of those things, but not all at once. That doesn't make them failures, it makes them human. These 10 players prove that you can dominate the NFL, make the Hall of Fame, and still never win a Super Bowl. Rings matter, but they're not the only thing that matters. Dan Marino, Barry Sanders, Randy Moss, Bruce Smith. These names mean something even without championships next to them. They changed how football is played. They inspired millions of fans. They gave everything to the game and came up short through no fault of their own. That's not tragedy, that's sports. Sometimes the best don't win. Sometimes greatness isn't enough, but their legacies live forever anyway. Rings or no rings. Thanks for watching this journey through football's greatest ringless careers. Hit subscribe if you want more content celebrating players who deserve respect even without championships. And remember, if your favorite player never won a Super Bowl, that doesn't make them any less great. It just makes their greatness a little more painful to watch.